Good morning. I'm making this video because there will not be a live video today. It's just easier for me right now to, pre-record myself talking about the lesson and sharing it. So I do encourage you to watch it before you do any of the work. So similar to the video I did earlier this week, I'm going to go over the text to kind of just make sure that you guys understand what you're reading. And I also just want to take time to say that there's a lot going on right now. We're in a global pandemic. We're seeing a lot of police violence and a lot of people just being murdered. And it's very traumatic. It's all over social media. It's all over the news. And it's just having a toll on me right now, which I'm sure it's affecting all of you as well. So I just wanted to validate those feelings that you may have, and just encourage you to try to take care of yourself. And if watching those things makes it worse, don't. You do not have to watch them. But it is important just to understand that this is a reality, unfortunately. And it sucks that it's happening when we're supposed to be worrying about protecting ourselves from COVID and protecting our families from getting sick. And it's not even safe to just go outside as a Black person right now either. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But we're going to get started. And let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so I hope you guys can see this. It's kind of small. But today we're talking about muckrakers. And the aim is, how did the muckrakers attempt to address the problems of industrial America? And the historical context is the term muckrakers was first used by President Theodore Roosevelt in referring to a character in John Bunyan's novel Pilgrim's Progress, who rejected a crown for a muck rake, which is a rake used to gather feces, poop, into a pile. The term was applied to writers and photographers who investigated and attacked social, political, and economic wrongs. Books and magazines, articles in McClure's, Collier's, and Hampton's exposed the worst abuses of the period and stirred public outcry against them. So at this, basically what you need to know from a historical context is that these muckrakers are people who were exposing the things that were going on behind the scenes, right? I hate to be so blunt, but it's kind of like thinking of a shit starter, literally, if it means a rake that's used to gather feces in a pile. So it's just exposing the truth. I guess you can kind of think of it as maybe even like a whistleblower. And for today, you're supposed to look at these images to answer the questions and look at this document, which is a excerpt from Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, which some of you may have heard of, some of you may have not. When I was in high school, we had to read the book. I found it to be incredibly boring, but I would say, was considered a muckraker because he exposed a lot of what was going on in the meat packing industry. So I thought it would be helpful to just really kind of dig deeper into who the muckrakers are before you analyze these images so that you can really kind of understand. So here I have this document that's pretty short, and there's just some reflection questions. So this is not mandatory. This is just a support, which is why I'm going to go over it in the video to help some of you. I don't know if the video I posted the other day was helpful, but hopefully it is posted early enough that you will catch it before you do it. So I'm just going to read, and I've highlighted the parts that I feel like are the most important, which is only two things, but for some of you, there might be more that we will highlight as I read. Sorry, I'm like hot and out of breath. As a result of industrialization and urbanization in the Gilded Age, 1870 to 1910, America was changed forever. In some ways, the change was positive, and in other ways, the changes were negative. The Progressive Era is the name given to the time period between 1890 and 1920. This name reflects the desire of a large group of American citizens to help society progress or move forward as a result of economic change during the industrial age. So that's highlighted because I feel like it's setting the stage for you to understand what is this progressive era. Like, yeah, we talked about industrialization, we talked about the Gilded Age, we're talking about all these different things that were going on with the economy at the time. So it's just like letting you know what we're transitioning into now. After the Gilded Age, we're now moving in this other direction called the Progressive Era. Progressive reform in this time period depended upon journalism as an important tool to raise public awareness of serious societal problems. Investigative journalists encouraged the progressive reform movement by not only informing and educating the public of serious issues, but also describing the problems in such detail that the government was forced to intervene to correct the injustice. For example, in the 1870s, meat and food production became industrial. This helped companies produce meat and food more quickly to meet the demands of the growing American population, but also meant that the food production industry changed radically. New workers were forced to work long hours and often unsanitary conditions. After Upton Sinclair published The Jungle, detailing the unsanitary practices of meat packaging plant in Chicago, the U.S. government began to regulate food production. The largest regulation came when President Theodore Roosevelt signed the Meat Inspection Act, 1906, and Pure Foods and Drug Act of 1906. The investigative journalists who played a major role in the progressive era were known as muckrakers. A table of muckrakers and the reform issues they brought to light are below. So, kind of like that very short blurb I read first on the handout, this is just more in detail and more in depth of who the muckrakers were, how they came to be, what was their mission, and what did they do. So it even mentions Upton Sinclair, who wrote Jungle, which is also one of the documents that you're going to be looking at to answer the questions. So like I highlighted in blue, like we said earlier, they were investigative journalists, right? And we could even highlight this here also in the same color because it really stresses, and we'll bold it. It really stresses like why they were doing what they did. They wanted the public to know what was going on, and it was also a way to grab the attention of the government so that they can correct these issues. So they were very important people during this time, okay? And so if you look at this table below, there's different muckrakers, right? And so if you look at these pictures in the handout, these photos relate to Jacob Riis, I believe, who is mentioned here, right? So his book or his work was How the Other Half Lives, and it was based on NYC tenement housing and unsafe living conditions of immigrants and the poorest people in the city, right? So the two examples of muckrakers you're going to be looking at is probably Jacob Riis and Upton Sinclair. So with that being said, this gives you the background information that you need to understand the questions and stuff that are asked of you on the Google survey thing. So some questions to consider just so that we can make sure that we all have understanding is, what was the name of the period between 1880 and 1920 meant to move America forward during the industrial age, right? So we know that's the progressive era. So we can write that here. Who were the muckrakers? Who were they? And like we said multiple of times, they were investigative journalists whose mission, I guess, was to inform the public what was going on, right? As a way to make progress. So here it says, how did the Muckrakers bring about change or help America to move forward? And we can simply just copy and paste this because it's right here. I should have did that before, but I didn't think of that. So paste that there. And this question is these are more analysis. So these are questions that you have to think beyond the text to kind of form your answer. So think of it as you're making an inference right now, right? So why do you think their work motivated the government to get involved, right? And if you consider what we've read, you can say things like, it encouraged the government to get involved because it was showing how badly the citizens were living. It was really exposing how horrible people were living, how people were being treated, their working conditions. This could lead to all types of other problems. And if the people know the truth and the government doesn't do anything, it's going to cause more problems because people are going to want to push back against what is happening, right? So that's one possible answer that we can use. So we can write, because for their work motivated the government to get involved because it was exposing the ugly truth, whatever you want to call it. Like poor working conditions. Okay. So what constitutional rights are muckrakers exercising? Now, I shouldn't give you this, but Um, it's your right to, it's their right to free speech, right? I mean, there's no like journalists, the freedom of the press. I think that's the First Amendment. Let's Google it. I'm pretty sure. Mm-mm-mm. Is it? Yeah. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, of abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. The freedom of the press is the First Amendment right. Um, whoops. And then lastly, what are some issues in your community today that you think a muckraker would have been interested in? Why? So there's a lot that could be mentioned here. I would leave that blank for up to you to think about, um, because there's just so many. And for some of us, there might be different connections that we will make. So I'm going to leave that there. But let's kind of just go over. This thing is in my way. Okay. Today's questions that you're going to have to answer. So, first, you have to describe what you see occurring in the photos of documents 1, 2, and 3. So, you have to explain each one. Okay. So, if we look at them, what do you see here? What does this look like to you? And you can even, in a sense, make connections to maybe yourself, to the world. Like, first of all, how many people are in this photo? There's more than 3, so that's a lot of people. There's one bed, a crib, and it looks like this is a one room, maybe apartment. And there's about 7 different people living in a small space. Now think of this time period. They probably don't have the same plumbing that we do, and also think of all the possible issues that could go on in all these people living in this crowded space, right? The second picture, they're outside. You have kids in the street. It looks like there's a dead animal, dead horse laying there. Does it look clean? I mean, compared to today's streets, sure. Does it look dirty? What do the kids look like? What are they doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, do they have any? Are they at a playground? No. Are there any toys on to play with? No. So, like, what do you see here? And then the third picture, I mean, little kids with coats and hats on, but no socks, no shoes, crowded together. What do you think they're trying to do? They're not in the house, but they're outside the window. Maybe they don't have a place to live. Maybe they're trying to keep warm, which is why they're so close. Maybe it's the middle of winter or the beginning of winter, end of fall. Like, you are making inferences. You are looking at these pictures and making observations based on what we just talked about. So remember, this is about muckrakers exposing the truth, right? These photos are from Jacob Riis, whose work was about exposing the housing and unsafe living conditions of immigrants and the poorest class. So when you look here, this is the living conditions they had to live in. So when you write your observations, you need to keep that in mind. Sorry. Okay, so the next question is, Jacob Riis hoped to expose the wrongs of society through his book, How the Other Half Lives. He wanted Americans to take notice and pressure the government into making laws to prevent these conditions from occurring. Create a law that you think Jacob Riis would support based on these photos. So you are the politician. What kind of law would you make that you believe would help fix the issues of the tenements and the poor living conditions that you think he would support? So you need to consider what you think proper living conditions are and how do you think people deserve to live, okay? Now, these questions are about Upton Sinclair and the jungle. So you have to read the document, and the questions are, first, based on this excerpt, what specific problems did Upton Sinclair observe in the Chicago meatpacking plants? Second, Upton Sinclair hoped to expose the wrongs of the food industry through the jungle. He wanted Americans to take notice and pressure the government into making laws to prevent these conditions from occurring, which he was successful at. So create a law that you think Upton Sinclair would support based on this excerpt. So that one is similar to the one we just discussed about Jacob Riis. You're creating a law that you think he would support that fixes the issues. But let's look at the excerpt to kind of answer this question about what specific problems did Upton Sinclair observe in the Chicago meatpacking plants. So first we look at the historical context just to refresh our memory. In 1904, writer Upton Sinclair's 2-month visit to Chicago's Packingtown district where meat was packed area provided him with a wealth of material that he turned into his best-selling novel, The Jungle. In just 1 week, a scandalized public snapped up 25,000 copies of The Jungle. Sinclair later commented about the effect of this novel. I aimed at the public's heart and by accident hit its stomach. Okay? So, as we read this, we're going to look for what specific problems did he observe, okay, to help you answer the question. There was never the least attention paid to what was cut up for sausage. There would come all the way back from Europe old sausage that had been rejected, and that was moldy and white. It would be dosed with borax and glycerin and dumped into the hoppers and made over again for home consumption. There would be meat that had tumbled out on the floor in the dirt and sawdust, where the workers had tramped and spit uncounted billions of consumption, tuberculosis, germs. There would be meat stored in great piles in rooms, and the water from leaky roofs would drip over it, and thousands of rats would race about on it. It was too dark in these storage places to see well, but a man can run his hand over these piles of meat and sweep off handfuls of dried dung, which is poop, of rats. These rats were nuisances, and the packers would put poisoned bread out for them. They would die, and then rats, bread, and meat would go into the hoppers together. This is no fairy story and no joke. The meat would be shoveled into the carts, and the man who did the shoveling would not trouble to lift out a rat even when he saw one. There were things that went into the sausage in comparison with which a poisoned rat was a tidbit. So, this is disgusting, obviously, but it's exposing what was really happening in the meat industry. So if we consider what is being said here, the problems are there's no real regulations. And I know you're like, what does that mean? But there's rats running all over the factory. They're using old moldy sausage and reusing it by adding borax and glycerin. Okay. And then the meat falls on the floor and it's mixing with germs and dirt, and it's all being thrown into the thing to make new sausage. There's no safe storage of the meat, so it's being exposed to water that we don't even know is clean. The rats are running all over it, and they even say like they're not ever cleaning up. So you're mixing rat poison, old meat, and dead rats all together into a sausage. So this is dangerous. This could have led to people getting sick, people dying, spreading of illness. There's so many things going on here. So what you probably should focus on for your answer is just the lack of food safety. Really, I mean, it's easy to say these terms now because we have them. Thank God for Upton Sinclair doing what he did, but the conditions in which the meat are kept, right? Unsanitary, rats, feces, like that's what the main issue was. And if you go back to this, it says that in here, right? The food production was unsanitary and just straight up nasty, okay? But also, remember, his work led to Theodore Roosevelt creating the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Foods and Drug Act, okay? So that is pretty much it for today. If you have any questions, you can email me or comment. And then the last one is just, in your own words, explain how Upton Sinclair and Jacob Riis fit the definition of a muckraker. And I think their work speaks for themselves, and you have the other document to help you with that. So I'm going to post this video. I hope it helps you with today's work, and have a good weekend.